أشرقت نفسي بنور من فؤادي حينما رأى. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to another episode of our program. We've come back due to popular demand, and this time we've switched it up a bit. We've got the faces of for the first time. So assalamu alaikum, guys. I hope you guys are well.
Alaikum salam.
I would like to start the program with a Quranic ayat that we have from Surah Rum, verse 23. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Other evidence of his existence are the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the differences of languages and colors. In this there is evidence of mankind. So as you probably already know, everybody, we're talking about racism, and something very big has happened and had a huge ripple effect. And it's quite nicely led on to the program that we had previously, which was about discrimination. I'm sure you can all agree, we ended it on discrimination, now we're talking about racism. So I think it's pretty good the way we're coming on to it, and it leads on from one to another. But hopefully, inshallah, within this next hour, we can elaborate on racism through the Quran and the Islamic values that we all have.
Inshallah.
And obviously, everyone that's tuning in at the moment, please share the link, and also you can get involved with our show as well. So we'll leave a number in the YouTube comments below, so if you want to send us text messages or phone in, please do get involved. And pop some familiar faces, and then obviously we have with us today Sheikh Anwar. Welcome back again. Thank you for giving us your time.
Glad to be back.
And again, Brother Muhammad Ali Muraj with us again. So it was a great show last time, so we hope that you will enjoy tonight again and get involved with that. So kicking off the topic, as we've selected racism in Islam, so I don't know if you want to give us a little bit of an introduction about that and how it's something that we should be taking into consideration in our daily lives as well.
Sure. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. This whole event of what happened in America, George Floyd, it was an execution in itself. Yeah, there's not a better word to use. For the lack of a better word, it was an execution. And as Hassan, as you mentioned, it had a ripple effect, in the other states, and it caught the attention of the media. And it's surprising because, people are now coming out in public in the midst of a pandemic, right? People are getting sick in the thousands, people are dying in the thousands, and yet they find that this is a basic right that they need to fight for. They're crying, they're screaming, they're shouting to have these basic rights given to them, but no one's listening. So, as I mentioned yesterday in Jummah Khutbah, it's like the frustration has now come out. The frustration has come out because when you look at the incident of George Floyd, this man was simply shopping. And for that, he was executed, right? And the anger is now coming out. The frustration is now being let out. And people are now roaming into the streets. All the other states are learning from this, and they're coming out into the streets as well. And just recently on social media, I saw a couple of days ago that, this has had a global effect. It's now come into the UK, it's gone into Italy, France, Spain, Europe in general. These are areas in the world that has been affected by the whole movement, Black Lives Matter movement. Not only that, but I think recently we had our very own Sheikh Nuru, when he gave his interview in Ahlul Bayt TV. I think this highlighted a number of skeletons in the closet within our own community. Yeah, not just within our community, but within the Shia community at large. And of course, there are some people who shy away from this discussion, but obviously there's no need to shy away from this discussion. What he highlighted in that interview, and of course last night he had an interview with Hujjat Stanmore, and he further explained some of the things that happened to him as well. Now, granted, I haven't listened to the whole thing, haven't had the time, but it definitely highlights some of the deficiencies that we have within our community. And I think this whole, this entire episode has really forced us to ask very, very difficult questions.
Definitely.
Not only on a political level amongst the politicians, but even on low-level communities like our communities, very key, essential questions are now being raised. Obviously, what he mentioned did not sit well with certain individuals, and obviously we all got the WhatsApp messages, and then we got the second WhatsApp messages, and things have, I think, in my opinion, have blown out of proportion. Obviously, then you had other speakers and scholars getting involved and writing, messages on social media. And I think just generally, it's asked key, essential questions with regards to our communities. And I think these questions have to be asked. These questions do have to be discussed so that we can progress as a community, so that we can try and fine-tune our communities, make it better.
That's a brilliant point, Sheikh. When an event like this happens in the magnitude that it has, then I guess it just gives us an opportunity to ask and to introspect, as well as kind of join the movement on the outside, but it gives us a chance to introspect and ask ourselves the same hard questions that we ask the others.
Definitely.
So it's interesting. I mean, that's one of the ways we need to progress as a community. This is one of the things that we need to really try and evaluate and see if we're guilty of this within our own communities. Recognition is the first step forward, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then we can practically implement certain strategies to try and make sure that this is no longer part of our community. Obviously, not pinpointing any community, but the Shia population at large. And let's be honest, we are guilty of this as well. You go to the Middle East, my God, it's quite rampant over there as well, in Iran, in Iraq. As Sheikh Noor famously said in his interview, it's there. And of course, I've heard this, secondhand information, but I've heard it from friends as well. The amount of racism that's there, not amongst the ulama, not amongst those who wear the turbans and whatnot, but amongst the general people.
The public, yeah.
It's surprising. It's very, very surprising.
So, Sheikh, if you could start us off. I know you highlighted it in your Jummah khutbah, but I guess as an introductory, especially given our title for the radio, Islam and Racism, if you could kind of highlight to us the core messages that, say, for instance, Islam is kind of giving us when it comes to racism and prejudice, and then perhaps we can all join in the discussion.
Yeah. So Islam's perspective on racism, Islam, I heard some of my friends talk about this in their lectures as well. Racism is seen as a symptom. It's not seen as a problem in itself. It's a symptom to a bigger, deeper issue, and that's arrogance. When you look at, for example, Shaitan is the first person to be guilty of racism. Now, that's a very tricky word to use, because obviously racism is in terms of, the color of your skin, whereas Shaitan is just generally the enemy of mankind, regardless of skin color, regardless of whatever tribe you come from. But for the lack of the better word, he is a racist. And that is a symptom. It's an effect of something far worse. It was because of his arrogance. It was because of his pride. It was because of his, his nose being stuck in the air. He saw himself being better than Adam purely because of his understanding of the material existence.
Yeah.
And that's what it is, isn't it, when it comes to racism? You can define it as however you want, prejudice, discrimination, but the feeling of superiority over another race, over another creations, whatever, that word superiority is always there, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Superiority complex, isn't it? We always think we're better and everyone else is inferior.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you look at Shaitan, and he obviously sees himself better than Adam because he's created from fire, whereas Adam is created from clay. Fire destroys clay. That was the logic that he used. And then obviously, as a consequence, as a result, he's exiled from, the kingdom of heaven. And the rest is obviously history. The Quran documents this. The Quran says, إِنَّهُ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌ مُبِينٌ. He is your most open enemy. Like, there's no shadow of a doubt in that.
Yeah.
The reason why is because he is a jinn, we are mankind, we are human beings. So that enmity, the animosity is still there. And, it's interesting because when you look at the world leaders, tyrants, despots, dictators, all of them were racist. Racism was like their justification to act out in arrogance. You look at Saddam Hussein, he had this special hate towards the Shia Ithna Ashariya.
Yeah.
You look towards Hitler, he had a special hatred towards the Jews. You look at Stalin, you look at, for example, Mussolini. You look at any personality, dictators at that level of power, that power that was given to them, they were racist to the core. And it was because of the arrogance that they had. Somehow they used racism as a tool, as an instrument to justify their actions. Now it's much more subtle, it's much more hidden. It's not there. You look towards America, America is seen like the land of
free,
the land of the free, the American dream. You dig deeper, you realize that place is, it's full of racism.
Well, the word itself, United States, I don't think it is very united, isn't it? So.
Certain people from certain parts of the US, for
Yeah.
example, redneck.
Yeah, and the hillbillies.
True.
Their own race as well. So, I mean, we as individuals as well, I think, we need to be very, alert about what sort of words we use in reference to other people,
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Definitely. Something that may feel normal to us may offend somebody in the slightest way, and that's something we need to look at ourselves in the mirror, I think, as well. We can't just turn around and say, they're doing it, and then not look at ourselves. We need to actually look ourselves in the mirror and realize, certain things that we do, whether you know or you don't know, we need to think and reflect on this. And as the Prophet's hadith is, an hour of reflection is greater than 70 years of dry worship. So, we have to start somewhere, and this community has to start somewhere, and the whole ummah has to start from somewhere. We have to be something, we have to do something about this.
And I guess one point that does come out of this is, of course, there is systemic racism in a lot of communities, in a lot of countries, but at the same time, I guess a silver lining that we can potentially take out from is, if we look at US, yes, there is a problem of systematic racism, but look at how many people have now come out in support of that, in support of the motto Black Lives Matter. How many of our own communities are hosting similar events and programs?
We've rallied behind it, essentially.
Exactly. So there's definitely an eagerness within communities, within human, to kind of get rid of this, to reflect and get rid of this racism. But it's now to a point where, what is it that can we do to take this out? So I guess this is potentially a good kind of question, one that we can use to introspect. A vice such as racism may be a systematic institutional problem, but it's very hard to kind of bring out the individualness out of it. So for example, I myself, no one's perfect. And there's an iota of superiority, racism, be it on race, color, or any other thing. But this is an issue of vice that potentially exists in every one of us, including myself. So I guess one question that we can potentially ask, and obviously the floor is open to us to start with, is what is it that we can do? What baby steps can we do to kind of bring ourselves out of that mindset? And if we have any callers to kind of contribute on that, that would be amazing as well.
I mean, I think we've got Maz has put it in. No, Maz hasn't put it in.
I posted on the YouTube. With our number on there. So
yeah, inshallah, everybody get in touch on there. You can text us in. I mean, we've got somebody that's texting saying we can't hear Mazahir very well. So we can't seem to hear you. You might need to move your tablet a bit nearer to you, bro.
Hopefully that's a bit better if you can let us know. But yeah, please do get involved. The phone is there.
Definitely.
The phone number's been posted on the YouTube comments, so you can check it out. And even type on the YouTube live chat if you want. I've got that open, so we can message you on there as well to interact.
Also, as well, coming to the point when we were talking about this earlier, this is not just a new thing where an innocent black person has been killed. This has happened plenty of times, and now it's come to a point exactly like what we were saying earlier. There's bigger people at play now who are standing up against this. I was just reading a few days ago that Stormzy, the UK rapper, he's pledged £10 million, half of his wealth, in the next 10 years to donate towards funds to go towards racism and to battle it. You got NFL stars, footballers, all this kind of, the Premier League that's resuming now, they said they're going to be wearing Black Lives Matter armbands as well. So it is, but it's something that's happened before, but now hopefully, it's like a revolution essentially, and hopefully this can rise like a phoenix out of the ashes and, come out of this and, at the end of the day, the racist people will find another way to say it in another way. You can go around two ways around it, but it's just hopefully, inshallah, keeping this fire alive and not letting it extinguish.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a positive thing that is now, in this day and age, is moving forward and people are actually taking, active, movements towards making a difference. So I think it's a really good initiative. If everyone unites, then it's going to reduce a lot of
Definitely.
the world. So
Definitely.
that's a good thing.
So what ideas do you have, Mohammed?
So
It's easy to ask questions.
It
but
is.
very
And
difficult to answer
I
them.
was interested. I've been introspecting for the past couple of days, especially since I saw Sheikh Nuru's clip that I was sent through. His Facebook channels, and he made the point that there are racist people within our communities, and for example, there can be Shia communities, Lebanese, Iraqi, Irani. But let's talk about Khojas, for example. So
Good point.
So something for me that I kind of took something from Sheikh Nuru's was him coming from a different background, going into those communities, felt like an outsider potentially. I'm not trying to put words into his mouth, so Sheikh Nuru, if you are watching, do correct me. But something that I thought that, what I could do is potentially when I see someone outside coming in, then potentially make myself available, be a bit more inviting, and kind of be the first guy that tries and makes that approach that, Salam, you don't seem to be from this community. And of course, easier said than done, but it just needs to be put in practice. So I think since when Sheikh Nuru's video was kind of circulated, and when I started introspecting, that was one point that I thought, this is something I can continue actively doing and perhaps push. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, that could be a very effective strategy to try and be more welcoming, especially to
More
those
inclusive.
who are not part of the community. Make them more inclusive. Yeah, definitely. I think that's a very, very effective strategy. Unfortunately, we have that, don't we? We have like certain communities that when you go there, you feel like a loner. You enter and everyone has their own circle that they mingle with, and
Their own bubbles.
they have their own bubbles and whatnot. And you're just there, and it's difficult to try and enter that
Part of the
social
furniture.
circle. Yeah.
Basically.
So
It is
I feel
difficult.
Like actually, when I visit other centres, I'm not going to name any names, but there are some centres where I felt quite uncomfortable myself actually being there. Whereas I know Leicester's our community and this is home for me, but I've always felt like, part of the community, just randomly go to any group of people and talk to them, and everyone knows each other. Whereas in certain other centres where myself, even though I'm part of the community, I didn't feel part of the community because just the whole vibe was a bit off. So I think reaching out and making people more comfortable when they approach a centre, whether they're Muslim or not Muslim, I think that's quite important in order to integrate with the rest of our society. Really.
Definitely, and I'm sure. If there are people out there on the channel, if they want to message in with any suggestions as well, please feel welcome. But it's definitely true. We can think about it. The majority of us all of here are Khoja, and there are plenty of non-Khojas that are part of this community. Now if we take a deep look, have we really, have we done enough? Have we made them feel that inclusive? There may be certain aspects in there that we've pushed them away. There might be certain Pakistani people that don't want to come to the center because of things that might have happened in the past. And it's time for us, we need to look at ourselves and make a change. And inshallah, people who don't visit the center, come down. If there's youth out there that are feeling discriminated, it's not just about racism as well, that they don't want to come to the mosque for certain reason, please come back, let's do this, let's sort this out, this is our community,
Do you feel that way?
Who, me?
Yeah.
So I'm a part of this community. I'm on the radio panel. But when I joined the community,
as in, do you feel that there are certain members of this community who were part of this community but were kind of driven away because of how they were treated, perhaps?
I haven't been a part of the community for that long, to be fair. But we were talking off air yesterday, I think, with Muhammad Ali as well, and we were saying there are certain people that used to come to the mosque that don't come anymore. For certain reasons. So there is, we don't want to name names and we don't want to say certain things on there, but there are things there and we need to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, we've done wrong, let's sort something out and take it from there. But in regards, if you're asking me personally, when I joined the community, I didn't know anyone. The only people I knew was Kumail from QE, and Muhammad Ali went QE, funny enough, and I didn't even know him. So when I joined, I actually started, it was with the tournament, sports tournament with table tennis, and we joined in, and I felt really inclusive. From there, it was just like a step-by-step process where I met a lot more people, got slightly involved with Behlool, did the Easter camp, and now I feel like I'm part of the community. For sure.
We took you under our wing very well.
You didn't take me under your wing, though, no.
So yeah, the blowback of the whole Black Lives Matter is it's remarkable how in the midst of the pandemic people are just fighting for their basic rights. It's interesting when you look at the statistics of what's happening in America as well, and I'm sure the statistics in the UK is probably not too far off. And obviously, I did very brief research on this for the Jummah khutbah yesterday. 80% of people who are stopped in the streets are African Americans. That's remarkably high compared to the other 20%, and obviously the 20 other percent include the non-African Americans. Yeah. 1 in 3 African American is bound to go to prison, and it's interesting because on social media you come across this quite a lot, where people are complaining. They say that, look, when a white person commits a crime and the black person commits the same crime, the white person is let off more easily compared to an African American. The white person may be given, like, for example, 9 months with parole, whereas the African American is given 12, 13 years straight in
Even if you look at death row, for example.
Yeah.
How many people are there who are from the African American?
Exactly. Now, and then of course you have the whole zip code issue in America itself, where if certain zip codes are known to be African American populated, and if you belong in that zip code, that's it. Your life is destined for you to be in poverty, or for you to turn to a world of crime. And this is obviously known in those areas, right? That this zip code, there's no what's the word? There's no hope for them whatsoever. It's very rare for a person to come out of that and to make a life of his own, to be successful, to be in, part of society as a whole. Other statistics include, for example, that, an African American family is known to have savings which, in comparison to a white family, it's like comparing 2% to 98%. So if a white family has over 20 years, 100,000 in savings, a black family over a period of 20 years will have $2,000 in savings. So these are the statistics that are coming out. These statistics are done rigorously, right? These research. It just shows you how unfortunate it is to be an African American in America at this moment in time. And this is a country that boasts liberty and freedom, and like I said, the American dream. But you dig deeper, and it's rotten from the core.
Yeah.
And it surprises me as to how people still want to go to America.
I was actually just talking to one of my friends who lives in Africa, Uganda, just a couple of nights ago. Actually, we were discussing this whole George Floyd issue, and even their perspective is that everyone from the east of the world think that America is like the place to be, opportunity. Whereas if you look at it, as you mentioned, I mean, it's really, really bad. I'd rather stay far away from that side of the world than to be going there even for a holiday. So I mean, people that see America as such a great place, their understanding, once they start seeing all these issues going on, maybe their understanding might change a little bit.
Well, I think also that as well, the media has a big part to play in that. So for them to obviously come to that realization that America is the place to be, what's put that into their mind? The media is very powerful at the end of the day.
And even movies and seeing like the nicer side of things, but they don't see
deep down, like Sheikh said, it's rotten, to the core. I think we have a question that's come through on here. Maz, do you want to read it out?
Open up the chat and see what questions we have. So, we have a question here from Muhammad Ali on the YouTube channel. Excuse me. If you can call on the line that we've posted on YouTube, not on my phone, please. So the message first question that we have: why is Leicester's main Husseiniya labelled as a Khoja centre? So I think that's relevant. I mean, most Khoja centers they have Khoja in the name, but why is that not like building a separate Khoja community center? If Khoja is not privileged, why is the caste part of the Husseiniya's name? Well,
I'll leave that answer to you guys, man.
I'm not a Khoja for me to comment on that as well. So you two are the Khojas. You're not a Khoja? Okay.
So the question that's posed here, good question, a question that's been discussed and brought up many a times.
Many times.
So it's clearly something that's close to many people's heart.
Yeah.
And I think the follow-up question, which refers to membership criteria, constitutions as well, are ones that have been brought up at a similar occasion. As important as it is to discuss those questions, maybe we can have a platform where we can invite some panelists where we can actually make some ground.
That would be a great idea.
Yeah, so at this point, there's 4 of us here, active members of the community. Nonetheless, I don't think any one of us is part of a particular committee at the moment. At this point, it might, so rather than kind of going in circles, it might be if there is interest, if the committee are up for it, then it may be something that they may want to take it up at a later instance. So
Definitely, inshallah.
I know there are 2 sides of the coins. To put this out there, there may be a thing that why can't we just call this a Muslim community center? I'm not going to go in anywhere in the constitution or the membership criteria, and I'll stay away from that, and I'll leave that to those people that are currently running the committee. So if anyone wants to call, then feel free.
Yeah,
as a personal opinion, I don't find any issue if a center is called Muslim Shia Iraqi Center, Muslim Shia Lebanese Center, Muslim Shia Afghani Center, and at the same time, Muslim Shia Khoja Center. Now, I'm going to say there is no liability on the MKSI for me saying so, whatever. It's my personal opinion. Similarly, I think Khojaness is a identity that many people relate to. Similarly, being Iraqi, being Afghani is an entity, is an identity. As soon as that identity stops other people feeling inclusive, then yes, I think we have a problem, we have a big problem. But as long as that identity is not damaging to other identities, and it's a way for you to share mutual cultures, mutual identities, then as a personal opinion, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it's something that's, I mean, I'm not going to go quoting things here and there because they can always be taken out of context, but that's a personal opinion.
I think that's a very beautiful point, very fair point as well. You know, there's no issue in having a Lebanese center, an Iraqi center, an Iranian center. I think it's a good thing in itself because
they are there as well, isn't it? You know, they are available. They are,
and you know, it's an opportunity for you to go and expose yourself to these, you know, these different types of centers, see how they conduct the
cultures,
majalis.
Like,
you know,
one point as well I wanted to make. I mean, I used to have a supplier that used to deliver goods from me who was Afghani, and they in their mosque in Birmingham, how they used to, like how we do matam, for example, we do matam standing up.
Yeah.
Their culture of the way they do it is they sit down and do the matam. So it's like different cultures as well at some point. So it's beautiful to see as well. But like what Muhammad Ali said as well, you know, inshallah, maybe if we can have a panel or something like that, maybe at a future show, that would be great. You know, we can talk about it and probably get more people interactive onto this.
Inshallah. No, of course, I anticipate, you know, some of the senior members in the Khoja community to get together and have a serious discussion about this, especially about what's happening in the recent days, where the spotlight is on us, on the specifically. So I give it a few weeks before something big is organized, and then inshallah we can obviously revise what's being discussed by them.
And I think as well, one major point that we need to call out. I mean, you sent us an image today on the group of our discussion
by
about
Dr. Amina Inlows.
Yes, about Imam Zamani. I mean, do you want to elaborate on that?
So it's a paper that I came across. The paper is by Dr. Amina Inlows. It's a journal of Shia Islamic Studies. It's a paper that she wrote. It's a couple of pages long. The title of the pages, the title of the journal article is titled "Racial Othering in Shi'i Sacred History." And in this paper, Dr. Inlaws mentions many kind of points regarding racism in Islam.
Yeah.
But more importantly, she's produced a table with references, which kind of goes to the ethnicity of the mothers of the Imam of the Ahlul Bayt. And after a while, especially after the 4th, 5th, 6th Imam, you kind of see a trend that, yes, they had Arabian mothers, but at the same time, they also had mothers from North Africa, Egypt, Sudan, Anatolia, so on and so forth, which just goes to show that the Imam didn't just kind of preach it, but they also practiced it.
Definitely. I mean, the statistics on this I'm looking at right now, and it's just like, you start off with Imam Ali, and it's 100% Arab. And as you scroll down, like if you go to Imam al-Jawad, from 100% Arab, it goes to 87.5% African. And then you go to Imam Askari, 96.9% African. And Imam Mehdi, 98.4% African. Like, that's a huge statistic.
Yeah, so, historically, from the 6th Imam onwards, they began to marry women from Sudan, from North Africa.
North Africa, that's right.
And, they 6th Imam, 7th Imam, 8th Imam, 9th Imam, everyone opted to marry African women. Very interesting. It's a very thought-provoking concept, isn't it? If the Imam comes in tomorrow and says, I'm the Mahdi, how many of us are going to believe him?
There is that hadith, isn't it? The first to reject will be us.
Yeah.
And could this be playing a part as well? We're talking about racism and Black Lives Matter. Could this be one of the criteria that certain people don't want to let go of these stigmas, just like what we were talking about when you were saying about Shaitan and Adam alayhi salam, not willing to change. Like Allah said as well, if Shaitan asked for forgiveness, he would forgive him. So it's a crazy concept to think about, that this could play a part, and it could be in the very near future as well. We never know.
So we have a comment from Ali Kassar. African doesn't have to mean black, by the way. North Africans are not dark. North Africans are not dark.
Oh, they're not?
Are they not?
You said Sudan, yeah?
I don't think it's relevant about the skin color when we talk about Africans or Africa.
But you can tell, right, from just from the tone of their skin that they're from Africa. It's something that it's known. Let's not shy away from this discussion. Yeah, true. Sometimes there's no attribution to it, but many times you can tell, and through the laws of generalization, obviously we can tell, for the lack of a better way of explaining it, unfortunately. So you were talking about the research paper.
Yes.
So did you have a chance to read through it or skim through it?
In all honesty, I did skim through it. But I haven't read it in the depth that I would have liked to. But it does talk about John bin Huey, the African slave that is usually attributed, who participated in the Battle of Karbala with Imam Hussein alayhi salam.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, I think it's a really good paper to read. It's got really good kind of details, but more importantly, it's got a decent sized kind of list of notes and bibliography with its own references. And then I think the latter half of the paper is attributed to the ethnicity of the imams.
So what's the conclusion of that paper? Have you had the chance to read the conclusion?
Unfortunately, no, I haven't.
No, eh? It'll be interesting what the conclusions are. You comfortable?
Well,
Sorry.
Batteries ran out of the charger, so I'm just sorting it out. Bear with me.
I think the conclusion, I'm not going to say that I have read it, but flicking through the paper right now, it ends with an introspection on how the dealings of the Imam force us to kind of now introspect on how we carry out our own dealings.
So yeah, so last night we were talking about this when planning today's program, and I was doing a bit more research on this whole concept of racism, especially the key questions that are being raised right now within our communities. And I came across a speaker that talks about the differences between racism and racialization.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a vast difference between the two. And racialization, it sounds like a very ominous, very technical term, but it's not really. And it's like a preface, it's like a prelude to the whole concept of racism. Now, racialization can be, essentially can be broken down into 4 steps. And the first step is, when you categorize people on superficial qualities, like the color of the skin, the language that they speak, the type of hair that they have. So these are superficial qualities that you tend to discriminate people, but discriminate in a way that you don't do anything beyond just think that they are different, right? You don't abuse them, you don't discriminate them physically. And what's interesting is that the whole concept of racialization and in turn racism is something, it's not inherent. Yeah, goodness, akhlaq, having good morals, all of that is inherent. Yeah, you're born with it. You're born by speaking the truth. You learn how to lie, right? Later on in your life. Inherently you know how to be good. Later on you learn how to be bad, right? Likewise, racism, to discriminate people based on the color of their skin, this is not inherent. You learn this as you grow up from your fathers, your forefathers, whatever it is. Yeah. But naturally, you grow up to just love the people around you. You see the world without any filters, without any discrimination. You don't judge people according to superficial values. You learn this from your parents or from the environment that you're raised in. So that's the first level, where you categorize people based on superficial qualities. Then the second level is no, you begin to segregate them. You begin to treat them differently. And it could be from, your thoughts, or it could be physically. You behave with them in such a way that you segregate them physically, like in the outer apparent world. So you look at America, for example, you had the whole bus system, right? The blacks at the back, the African Americans at the back, and the colored, the non-colors in the front. You have this neighborhood, that particular neighborhoods are known to be for this particular race. You go to school, there is obviously different fountains for different, races. So that segregation on a physical level. The third level is when you attribute negative things to them. So it's not based on any data, it's not based on any statistics. You just naturally tend to attribute very negative qualities to these particular groups of people, right? You see one or two of them, and then all of a sudden you generalize, you stereotype to the whole nation. We tend to say, okay, oh, look, like, they do this type of job. Oh, look, they do this. Because we come across certain individuals, 1 or 2 or 3 in our lives, and then we just naturally generalize. We generalize it to the whole nation. We stereotype. You come across someone who doesn't do a job properly, none of them can do the job properly, We come across 1 or 2 taxi drivers who are from the same race, or all of them are taxi drivers. We tend to do this. So we attribute negative qualities to individuals. And it's interesting because this happens on a very, very high level, especially in America and to some degree in the UK as well. When you have, for example, an African American who's committed a crime, and he goes to the courtroom and he stands before a judge. The judge doesn't see him as a person who's committed that crime. He doesn't, judge him according to the crime that he's committed, but rather he takes it a step further and he has all of this negative attribution that is subconsciously there in the back of his mind, and that dictates the law or the judgment that's given. So, this person cannot contribute to society, this person is violent towards society, this person is counterproductive in society. All of that baggage then comes and it plays an effect, it plays a role when that judgment is given. That's why when a white person and a black person commit the same crime, the black person is more likely, and when I say more likely, you're talking about
high statistics.
High levels of statistics that he will be given a higher sentence, a more severe sentence compared to the white man because of that baggage, that negative attribution to that entire race.
True.
Right? And then obviously the fourth stage, the final stage, is now you're at that stage where you believe that no, it's inherent. That, you know, whatever bias you have towards them, you believe that this is how they are, this is how they've been born, this is just a part of their essence. Right? And then obviously when you reach that stage, this is what brings about racism. This is what brings about you acting out biasly against them with oppression and so on and so forth. So it's very interesting how, you know, racism is created in the heart and what leads to it. Racism is not something that develops overnight. It's something that develops over a long period of time. And usually, you know, people who are racist, deep down, they have very low, very weak akhlaq.
Yeah.
They have so many spiritual vices that aids them to behave in that racist way. When you look at Islam, when the Prophet came towards the people of Mecca were racist. Yeah, there's no shadow of a doubt in that. And the Prophet knew that one of the way of reformation was to, you know, delete these barriers of racism, to judge people based on the color of their skin. And so the core message of Islam said that, look, as a community, we need to develop a very strong brotherhood community, a community of brotherhood, a community of sisterhood, a community where people are brothers, right? For us to reach that stage, we need to first reform ourselves from within. When individuals reform themselves from within, then you can have change created at a level of society. That's how society changes. As long as people are not willing to change, people have no intention to change from within, you're not going to see any changes in society at all. Right? So that's something very interesting to keep in mind. And we have so many examples of racism taking place in the city of Mecca where the Prophet kind of put his foot down and said, enough is enough. You look at Salman al-Farsi, right? Very famous story. This person, he wasn't a black person, right? He was, it goes to show how racist the Arabs were at that time. Even people of their own skin color. Salman al-Farsi was Iranian, right? Iranians and Iraqis, or Arabs, they're of the same skin tone, right? Isn't it? And even though he came from a different land, they belittled him. There's that famous story, you know, when Salman al-Farsi walks into a mosque, masjid of the Holy Prophet, and the Arabs were there sitting, and they were, you know, the Arabs, they were proud of their lineage. Yeah, they had so much knowledge of their lineage and, you know, their fathers and forefathers. They could go back many generations, and they would talk about how, you know, their fifth grandfather was such a brave warrior, and they would sing praises about him and stuff. They would even know, you know, the genealogy of dogs, for example. Yeah, that's how proud they were of their lineage. They turned to Salman al-Farsi and they're like, "What's your lineage about? Explain it to me. You know, this is what we have. What do you have?" And Salman al-Farsi, obviously, the news reaches the Holy Prophet, and the Prophet makes that famous sentence, you know, that he's not Salman al-Farsi. Call him Salman al-Muhammadi. He's from Minna Ahl al-Bayt. Yeah, he's from us, the Ahl al-Bayt. That's his position. So in a single sentence, the Prophet was able to erase the whole, you know, aspects of racism. That you're not going to have favors on the Day of Judgment because of this color of your skin. You're going to have favors on the Day of Judgment because of the taqwa that you had, the iman, the amalun salih, the good deeds, the righteous deeds that you did in dunya. All of that will count on the Day of Judgment. The colors of your skin, Baba, it doesn't matter. You look at the nafs of the human being, the soul of the human being. The soul is not, you know, it's not bound to color.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the essence of the human being. That's like the battery of the human being, isn't it? It's not bound by color or race or language or anything like that. So that's obviously something important to keep in mind. And then obviously, Hassan, you mentioned the point last night about how the imams used to have slaves.
Yes, yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So, oh man, that's a deep discussion in itself. I know Professor Jonathan Brown, he's written a whole book about slavery. It's something that I haven't come across. But Muhammad, you know, it's something very interesting to look into. He talks about slavery from an Islamic perspective. And of course, you have scholars amongst the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah that have quite, you know, they've spoken at length about this and quite openly as well. You know, from the limited amount of research that I've done, you know, Hassan, it's very interesting when you look at, for example, the slaves of the Ayyimma alayhim salam, they were proud to be the slaves of the
definitely.
Ayyimma. Yeah?
There's that one story, I mean, that I heard about, is it Imam Zainul Abidin, if I'm not mistaken, about the slave who pours the hot soup on top of it, and then it's incredible to know that the slave had that much knowledge of Quran to essentially said, restrain your anger. Okay, I've restrained my anger. And then pretty much right to the end of it says, okay, now free me. And he goes, okay, you're freed. It's amazing. So I don't think it was a relationship of a slave and master.
It wasn't. It was more of a relationship between a student and a teacher,
Definitely.
wasn't it? Between a son and a father. And that's how the Imam, the Aima used to treat their slaves. And then obviously the barrage of, the whole concept of slavery that began 400 years ago is what we've been propounded in our minds.
Yes.
Whenever we mention the word slave, automatically you have to think about, and even, mutabadir, the first thing you think about is a person in shackles, a person who is, just tormented day in, day out by his master. It's not. The Islamic concept of slavery is completely different. It's with respect, a lot of respect and humility. You look at Qambar. Qambar was killed because he refused to, disown Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. He was killed because he was so proud he boasted to Hajjaj ibn Yusuf al-Thaqafi that I am the slave of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Imagine.
Crazy. Coming back to your point earlier that you were saying, a racist person isn't born a racist.
Yeah.
Now, would you say it's like a nature-nurture thing? Is it the environment, do you think, that plays
definitely.
a role? Or do you think it's
No, it's the environment. It's the environment. Definitely the environment. It's the values that the parents have. It's the values of, the environment that they're raised in. No human being is born a racist. Definitely not. All human beings are born good. Only the values that they have been taught makes them bad, changes and corrupts their minds.
Yeah.
That's how it works. I think I've done a lot of talking now.
Is there anything you guys want to add, Muhammad Ali?
I guess at this point it would be really good to get someone to call. We realize it's going to be Maghrib time soon.
Yeah.
So if there are anything that you'd like to kind of elaborate, comment or ask, or
definitely get in touch, guys.
Or yeah, exactly. Put something into the conversation, then please do call. The number that Mazaris has posted is 07405979516, and that can be found on the live chat on the YouTube.
Inshallah, do join in into the conversation.
Okay.
Go for it.
So there may be a call. So let's see. In the meantime, I guess the question that I erroneously posed and I answered or tried to answer myself. Is there anyone else that would like to kind of
What question was
share about the introspection and how we can kind of, what action that an individual as we can do to kind of try and get out of that mindset? Because at the end of the day, this is something that we may all be victims of, that it may be a spiritual vice that may be in all of us. So how is it that we can kind of always keep us on check, and then kind of, if there is anything that does happen, then how can we then go about it?
I think having the right, correct mindset really helps in this area, doesn't it? This entire discussion we've been talking about how superficial the whole concept of racism is. And obviously Islam dejects this from the very get-go. You can't judge people based on these superficial values. Okay, how do you judge people? How do you judge people around you? You judge them through the knowledge that they have, isn't it? You come across someone who has little or no knowledge, you're not gonna, benefit from them in any way whatsoever. You're not gonna go back to them and even try and befriend them. This is what we do as individuals. So Islam promotes this value of having knowledge and gaining knowledge. And when you go back to this ayah of the Holy Quran in Surah Al-Hujurat, that we've made you of different tribes. إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن ذَكَرٍ وَأُنْثَى وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. So that we've made you different tribes and different colors and different, we've given you different tongues so that you know one another. You just know about the culture, gain knowledge about each other. You know, there's a lot that we can learn from, you know, different races, from different communities, and likewise different communities can learn from us. So we need to try and intermingle and try and gain knowledge about one another, yeah? To have that mindset that, look, there's a lot that I can learn from them. We're not perfect, yeah? None of us are perfect. Neither our community is perfect. But when we see and interact and engage with other communities, we can learn so much from them. And we can try and implement that in our communities and try and make it better as well. And obviously, we've had many stories of how, you know, other communities tend to look towards the Khoja. You know, and we have many, you know, good traits, respectable traits. Let's not ignore that either. And there's many things that they, you know, look towards us and learn from us as well. You know, there are many a times they seek advice from us in our communities, and we are more than happy to help them. So I think with that mindset that we can always gain knowledge from them, that we can always learn from them, that really helps, gives us that little kick, you know, that motivation to go and interact with them more.
Yeah, I mean, another good point maybe is visiting other centers
Yeah,
of different
yeah.
cultures, you know, not just sticking to another Khoja Jamaat, like if we go to Stand Morning, let's try something different, you know, or invite other people from other centers to come into our centers. That might be a good thing. You know, we have intrafaith. Why not do this where we can call brothers of our own sect into the
exactly.
mosque, and they can see our cultures and they can learn from us, and maybe we can learn from them, you know, at the end of the day. We're all here to learn. And I think on that note, I think, shall we end it on there? I think it's coming up to our cut-off point. Anything you guys want to add? Inshallah, yeah. Time did fly.
We've got a comment from Jibril. He says, great discussion and some very thought-provoking points. We should have put some pressure on him, yeah, about the constitution and like why should the center be known as MKSI? You should have called in.
Maybe he can be a panelist on our
Put
next
some
show,
heat on
maybe,
you.
inshallah. Hey, Jibril.
Ahsant. Yeah, we need to call him
That
next
might be a
time.
good point. But
Inshallah, yes, definitely. We've got a list of topics for discussion.
the next one as well, I think, will be a bit controversial as well.
Yeah, they're all controversial.
Inshallah,
My friend,
might be a
they're
bit
all
more controversial than
we're
this.
gonna try and rock the community a bit.
There you go.
No, I'm just joking.
But thank you, everybody, brothers and sisters, for joining us today. Inshallah, we will be back soon, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the new format. We had a lot of requests, people to see our faces. So I think, inshallah, you all enjoed the show, and we shall be with you very, very soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.